The following photograph was taken in November of 1863. It appears to have a couple cavalry officers and some men, a woman, and a dog out in front of a house. This photograph was labeled the G.J. White House in Gettysburg, in the vicinity of Gettysburg, and then later mislabeled as a cavalry unit on the east side of Gettysburg. Today, this house looks like this. Now, the story behind the house is that Alexander Gardner, James F. Gibson, Timothy O'Sullivan came here in July of 1863, just after the Battle of Gettysburg. Big round top in the distance over there. After the battle, Mr. George J. White was a relic collector, and he collected guns from the battlefield and would later hide them in the rafters of this house. Now, just after the Battle of Gettysburg, Alexander Gardner and his team, coming from Emmitsburg, Maryland, where Gardner had a son at Mount St. Mary's College, they made their way into Gettysburg right by this farm. On the way to Gettysburg, he met George and Hester White. The White farm sat a couple miles south of Gettysburg with a view of the largest features, the round tops, which are just beyond those trees over there. George befriended Gardner and told him about the recent battle and offered himself as a guide. Now, White had been collecting, as I said, relics from the battlefield and then bringing them back to this farm. So White would then take Gardner out to see the key areas of the battlefield. Gardner and his team did their work, taking some of the most iconic photos of the Civil War at Gettysburg, and George White may have been one of the members of the team that helped Gardner and Sullivan move the famous body that we would know as the sharpshooter in Devil's Den. This has been part one of the George J. White Farm here on Gettysburg Historic Walking Tours. And as you look at the photograph, you can see the large house on the left side with the 3 windows on top, 2 windows and the door on the bottom level, and then a summer kitchen. To the right of that was a smaller house, which was the original house, and then there was a smokehouse to the right of that. Today, the house looks like this. And the area where the summer kitchen was has a second level built on it now with 4 bedrooms and a porch. And of course, a porch has been added to the front of the house. The smokehouse still exists, though the original house was torn down at a later date. Over here is the smokehouse. And where you see that barbecue grill today is where the area of the house, the original house in the photograph, once stood. This has been the George J. White Farm here on Gettysburg Historic Walking Tours. The George J. White Farm here on Gettysburg Historic Walking Tours. And we're here along Black Rock Road, 680 Black Rock Road. And we're doing a video on a famous photograph that was taken that has always been mislabeled or drawn to some confusion. And today I stopped by here and I met the owner of the house, Doug, who gave me permission to come here on private property and take pictures and do this video series. And in this video, I want to talk a little bit about George J. White. He was born on August the 19th, 1816. He married Hester Geneva Murphy on December the 5th, 1844. Now, he lived after his wedding in Hampton, Pennsylvania, and he had some children. David Murphy White in 1846, Hester Belinda White in 1847, William Willis White in 1849, Sarah Elizabeth White in 1852, Nancy Olivia White in 1854, and Newton Jarrison White in 1856. Right after that last birth, he moved to Gettysburg in 1857. And when he moved here to this house, he had 3 more children: Edna Jane White in 1858, Ida Mae White in 1861, and Otis Warner White in 1864. Now the family lived here on this farm along the Marsh Creek during the Battle of Gettysburg. Now Hester, his wife, who was 1 month pregnant with Otis, baked bread for both armies as the battle lines changed and fell back from the Round Tops. George assisted Gardner and Sullivan after the battle onto the battlefield, and they pinpointed certain locations where he knew the actions were. I believe personally that he may have been involved in the moving of the Confederate body with the Gardner team on the iconic photo of the sharpshooter at Devil's Den. This has been part 3 of the George J. White Farm here on Gettysburg Battlefield Historic Walking Tours. George J. White Farm, and here I am in this next part at the smokehouse, and this is where the family would have cooked and smoked their meats back from when they moved here in 1857 until the time they lived here through the year of 1864. And right here on this side of the house would have been where the original house once stood. You can see over here on the wall where there was a beehive oven that once protruded from the wall of the summer kitchen. So you had the summer kitchen. Later it was added on to at the top, but the summer kitchen and then the original house, the foundation would have been right here, and then the smokehouse behind it and to the right. And as we walk to the back of the house, I'll give you a view of the back of the house here, where once the well was for the household. And this is the back of the George J. White Farm. Original 1863 photograph, again, we said it was mislabeled as July of 1863. But if you look at the trees in front of the house, they have no leaves on them. The answer again is simple. In November of 1863, President Abraham Lincoln was invited to speak at the dedication of the National Cemetery. And as Gardner, O'Sullivan, and their team came back to Gettysburg to cover that event, they remembered George J. White, their friend, and stopped here and made this home their photographic headquarters. Again, George J. White accompanied the team to the National Cemetery, where they would watch Abraham Lincoln deliver his Gettysburg address, and they would all, as a memento, pose for the iconic and often mislabeled photo that is the subject of this video. 1963 November photo, you can see the house, but you do not see the barn. The barn once sat over on this area of the property. It was later replaced by this wagon shed and outbuilding over here. On old Gettysburg maps, there is also what appears to be an old farm lane that went to the side of the house, and that farm lane today is actually this lane here that goes back. As I zoom in, you're going to see it cut through the field. That was one of the original farm lanes, and it leads over toward the Emmitsburg Road, because one of the entrances to the farm was from the Emmitsburg Road, which is important in the placement of Alexander Gardner and Timothy L. Sullivan, because just as the armies, the 1st and 11th Corps, on the first day at Gettysburg made their way from Emmitsburg along the Emmitsburg Pike, O'Sullivan and Gardner also made their way in that direction. So it is very probable that they came from Emmitsburg, which was over here up the pike, and then took this road here to the farm. And that's where they stayed twice, once in July and then once again in November. And then Mr. White accompanied them to the Gettysburg battlefield, mostly on the southern end of the battlefield, down by the Round Tops. And from this farm, that would have been in this direction over here. This has been a video series on the George J. White Farm. It's been a special video because of the photo that's very confusing sometimes, and also because this is private property. It isn't somewhere where just anybody can go and take pictures and shoot videos. And as you've seen in my first part of the video, Doug allowed me to come here while he was working here in his shed and take pictures and shoot this video, so I'm definitely appreciative of that. This has been another exclusive, in-depth look at a farm in Gettysburg, which most people don't get to see, visit, or know much about, here by historian Frank P. Marone Jr. on Gettysburg Historic Walking Tours.